Miami Dolphins fans, your team has found another way to amaze you, and once again, it's not good. The Dolphins and Jalen Ramsey have mutually agreed to find a trade. This one hurts. What's going on, Dolphins fans? I am Chris Perkins. Welcome to this week's edition of Dolphins Deep Dive with Perk. I, of course, am your South Florida Sun Sentinel Miami Dolphins columnist. That is my colleague David Furones, your South Florida Sun Sentinel Miami Dolphins writer. Furones, since we last checked in with the Dolphins, since we checked in with Mike McDaniel at the owners' meetings, they had Tyreek Hill having the police called to his house, the Jalen Ramsey trade news, Calais Campbell going back to Arizona, Teron Armstead retiring. This team just makes news, right? I mean, my goodness.
Perk, I'm glad to announce that I have mutually agreed with you to do today's show, and I'm very happy to be here on this wonderful Wednesday to talk about all of this. But yes, always constant news, even in the offseason, all the movement, a lot of veteran pieces lost, and now Jalen Ramsey on the trading block. That was a bit of a stunner. We can talk a little bit as to why maybe we should have seen this coming, but didn't quite. Maybe Tyreek Hill was distracting us so much. He was always the guy that everyone's talking about, but the team is just so steadfast on they are keeping Tyreek Hill every time we ask, and now it's Jalen Ramsey on the trade block. What do you know?
Yeah, incredible, incredible. Hey, we'd like to welcome our viewers on YouTube. We invite you to leave questions, comments, thoughts on our live chat, the best place to get intelligent Dolphins talk. We also tell you that you can catch this podcast on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. And we'd like to tell you that if you would like to subscribe to our weekly newsletter, The Fans Flash, you can do so by scanning the QR code on your screen. So, David Furones, on today's show, we're going to talk about the Dolphins seemingly parting ways with all-pro cornerback Jalen Ramsey, the future Hall of Famer, and we'll talk about reasons that we think that this is happening. No official reason has been disclosed yet. We're also going to talk about whether the Ramsey situation affects the Dolphins' draft strategy. You know, the draft is coming up on April 24th. In our Furones bonus, David Furones, the UM fan, the UM grad. Well, yeah, okay, right, okay. He will tell us why he is pumped about the draft as a Canes fan, not so pumped about the draft as a Dolphins fan. And finally, we're going to ask whether the Chris Greer, Mike McDaniel era is officially a failure now that it appears that they'll play 2025 without Jalen Ramsey. As we always say around here, there's an ocean of possibilities. Let's dive in. There we go, baby. There we go. There's our dive. All right, Furones.
I only remember once it actually happens. I never actually go in thinking I'm going to do it, but then it's something about that intro that just gets me pumped and gets me ready to just do the head nod with it. You know?
You're diving in, baby. You're diving in.
That's our chop celebration. We dive in.
That's right. Right, exactly.
Yeah. He chops, we dive.
That's it. That's it. Exactly, man. There we go. All right, Corona. So look, the Jalen Ramsey situation, how we got to this point, is it more personal or is it more business, do you think? And then, you know, Chris Greer said yesterday that this is not a money thing. It's not a contract thing. I asked him whether this was a scheme thing, and he seemed to say it's not, but he kind of said no, but he said it kind of in the context of saying, no, I'm not going to reveal any information from private conversations that I've had with Jalen's representatives. I think it's more personal. And I don't know if he gave a vote of no confidence to Mike McDaniel. Somebody on Twitter said that, perhaps they asked him to switch to safety. That would be more schematic. Maybe they told him he needs a different leadership style. I'm just throwing stuff out there. We don't know. But I just think it's more personal than business. What are your thoughts along those lines?
Perk, this is why this is such a confusing situation because, okay, we clarified one thing from the team, by the way. We don't have Ramsey's side in all this. Not that he would give us more than 2 minutes of his time to explain, but that's neither here nor there. But that's neither here nor there. But we clarified from the team that Ramsey didn't request a trade. He didn't make the request. That was the message the Dolphins wanted to get out there Tuesday afternoon, hours after the 7 a.m. news bomb of this trade saga dropped. I kept calling it a trade request, but then I switched. All right, I'll go with trade saga because I guess now we know it's not a trade request or demand. So that was surprising because one would think in this mutual decision, okay, it would have to start with one set, and you would figure it's Ramsey. You would figure that it was Ramsey who was the one that was initiating all this, and maybe he wants to get off this sinking ship while he's still at the end of his prime. Maybe he sees Calais Campbell moves on. He sees Teron Armstead is retiring. A lot of the veteran pieces and how it didn't work well last year. Maybe he wants to get out of here. But if it's not that, if it wasn't a trade request, then it would indicate the Dolphins really do want to move on from Ramsey. Which why would that be? After you just gave him a contract extension 8 months ago, and that would be surprising if you were to tell me that when it's such a win now and such a critical year for Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel. So from that perspective, Chris Greer, he didn't want to get into the reasons why. It left us with more questions than answers. So now we speculate. And when a team's measured, calculated response is to leave something up to speculation, it might just be that the real reason could be worse than whatever our imagination could come up with. So let's let our imaginations run wild. I could totally see a scenario where Ramsey and McDaniel didn't see eye to eye. I could see a scenario where Ramsey was asked to take on more of a leadership role for a team that desperately needs those veteran voices. And he said, no, I do things my way, and maybe it made for an untenable situation. So because let's get one thing clear about Jalen Ramsey. For as good a player as he is not a guy you look to for leadership. He doesn't rally guys. He sticks to himself. We talked about it last show how he doesn't stretch with the team. He does his own thing. Comes out for the second period of practice. Not to make too much of a big deal of that, but now also for us in the media, we don't view him as approachable. That's one thing, but I feel like you rarely see other players, young DBs, interact with him, which tells me he's not approachable for them either. Getting him to talk to the media after a loss is like pulling teeth, which again, not the most important thing from the team perspective, but that's something that a leader and voice for the team does. So he just seems to me from not being in there often, but just having those open locker rooms, keeping an eye on the team. He seems a little bit disconnected from the rest of the team. So when we talk about those end of the season storylines of tardiness in meetings and guys not being professionals and the fines that Mike McDaniel felt he had to dish out. Now we focus a lot of our attention on Tyreek Hill, but something tells me Jalen Ramsey was at the heart of that too, and I think we're seeing that come to fruition here.
Yeah, I'll say this about Jalen Ramsey and his leadership style and kind of what we observe from 30,000 feet. He's not approachable in the locker room for media. Like I've said that this locker room is the friendliest, one of the best locker rooms I've ever been in 29 years of pro sports coverage. These guys are great. They are absolutely fantastic. Jalen Ramsey is a guy who you have to approach with a very specific question. Something about coverage, hand placement, feet. How do you defend this guy? What about this coverage? If you just go up to Jalen and say, "Oh, who is the toughest guy you've ever defended?" He's going to look at you and laugh, and you're going to walk away pissed off, and he's going to walk away pissed off, and you're both going to think you've wasted each other's time. But I've had one really good conversation with Jalen, and it was this year in the locker room. It was like 20 minutes, but we did get into Fangio and how he didn't like how he was being used last year and things along those lines. Some very technical stuff about playing cornerback. He was thrilled. It was a great conversation. But there's the other part of Jalen, like after the Jets finale last year, when he's being asked to talk to the media and he says, "No, I'm not going to talk. I'll just take the fine." Players get fined if they don't talk. And like 3 or 4 times, no, I'll just take the fine. No, I'll just take the fine. It's like, dude, you're a team leader. You need to speak. Fans need to hear from you. They want to hear your voice. You're a future Hall of Famer. They want to hear what you think about this situation. And Jalen's thing was, no, I'm not going to speak. You just find me. I just find me. And it's like, what kind of attitude is that? I'll say this also about Ramsey. I've made the statement that with Tehran and Calais, you could kind of see them putting their arm around a youngster. We always saw them counseling young players. You didn't really see that from Ramsey, but that's fine. Jalen's leadership style was, you remember, Furones, when they were telling us about his knee rehab, how he was an absolute beast. He's in there at 6 a.m., he's staying late, he's doing things that he didn't need to do. I think Ramsey's style is more follow my example. I'm not going to be a warm, cuddly guy to come share tips with you. You just work as hard as I do and you do the things that I do. And that's how you can become a better player. So that's kind of my observation of Jalen Ramsey. I don't have anything bad really to say about him, but I really don't have a whole lot of good things to say about him either. So that's kind of where I'm at with Jalen Ramsey. Maybe that's where the Dolphins are at. We don't know. Let's say what's up to Dave Harbor from San Diego as usual. JD, the great one. Chris is checking in from the UP, baby, a UPer in Michigan, baby. Nice, very nice. Ender Fireplays YT, what's going on? Trinity Soundworks. Troy checking in from Louisville. Manolo Rivera. Miguel Cardenas, also from San Diego. Rifleman 165 Carl Becker. What's going on? Good to see everybody in here. Um, Look, Furones, let me ask you this also about this. The Dolphins have lost lots of heart and soul players. If you want to look at Xavier Howard and Rob Hunt and Christian Wilkins, Javon Holland, Raheem Mostert, Teron Armstead, Calais Campbell, Jerome Baker, do you think that losing Jalen Ramsey is that on the same magnitude as these other losses? I kind of think that it is for different reasons, but you've lost so many heart and soul players recently.
I mean, probably even more so, probably even a greater loss as far as on the field, what he brings. If you're talking about heart and soul, in terms of leadership, then maybe there's others that would fall more into that category. I would say Teron Armstead and Calais Campbell would be the bigger losses from that perspective, where between the two of them, that's about 30 years of NFL veteran experience and guys who, by the way, are extremely approachable for other players, young players in the locker room. I mean, for Patrick Paul, as a second round pick, a rookie last year, having a year to sit behind Teron Armstead, that was as good a situation as could be
Mhm.
for him. Your second round pick, you're coming out a little bit raw. You have the tools, but you need someone to work under and learn from in your first year, and I think Teron Armstead was just the perfect situation for him. So, and we'll see how it plays out now in year two for him. Now that he's anointed the starting left tackle, but yeah, I mean, as far as on the field production, then Jalen Ramsey would be an even bigger loss than any of those. But boy, you reel off all those names, and then you really just look back and. Yeah, that 2023 team, what a golden
Yeah,
opportunity that was. Because I think we started saying in 2022 is that 2 year window sort of. And I don't,
right.
maybe we kind of like we're extending it to like starting with 23 and then going into 24. But there was a real window that then all those contracts are going to start to catch up to you. And then you got to pay two of the big money and you're not going to be able to keep everyone. But wow, what a roster. We're going to look
Yep.
back at that team
Yep.
and also the opportunity they had 3 games up with 5 weeks remaining in the AFC East against the Buffalo Bills, and you blew it, and then you ended up in the wild card as a sixth seed in the fourth coldest game in NFL history in Kansas City, the eventual Super Bowl champions. What a drop off that was! And with that roster, with Tua actually healthy all season,
Yep.
I know injuries derailed it at the end of the year with half the defense, but boy, what an opportunity missed, and that's the one that everyone's going to look back on.
Veronica, I'm going to wrap up this segment by asking about the Dolphins' culture on two different kind of wavelengths here. John Russell says giving out contract extensions and then trying to move off players is nothing short of business suicide. That's the business culture. Manolo Rivera says the team needs a cultural change. Can't do that with the same locker room leaders. That's the player culture. Is one worse than the other? Do both need to change? What do you think about the business culture and the player culture of the Dolphins?
Yeah, business culture, trying to appease everyone is what it seems to have been the shortcoming here. and I put out a tweet where I listed everything the Dolphins did in 2024,
Yeah.
all the big extensions. It was first it was the Jalen Waddle extension. Okay, yeah, he's a good player. His first 3 years, you
Yep.
want to get out in front of it,
Yep.
um,
Right.
and pay him before the contract's only going to get more expensive. Okay, then okay, well, if Tua's your franchise quarterback, you got to lock him in with a contract extension. The market is the market. You pay him what you got to pay him, and that's what they did. They extended Tua. Now Tyreek Hill wants his money because he sees everyone else. He wants more guarantees added to the years that he already has on his contract. Now Jalen Ramsey, who is already handsomely paid,
Yep.
now all of a sudden because every couple of years other players at your position are going to pass you in terms of how much money they make, and your ranking in terms of contract slips among your peers. So now he wants to be the highest paid cornerback again. You give him a contract extension to appease him. Coach Mike McDaniel, you also extended him because, hey, if you have all these guys you want to extend, you might as well extend the head coach too, right? And then out of all five of those, all of them either let you down in 2024 or have asked out at some point. And in one case, Tyreek Hill, both. He did both.
Yeah.
He said he wanted out and he let you down with not even 1,000 yards. Yeah, he did both. Yeah, that's just trying to make everyone happy. And you see in the NFL, you can't do that. And then now that's why you're reversing course so quickly on some of those.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a bad situation, and you're exactly right about 2023. That boy, these guys are going to look back when they're done, when they're sitting in their rocking chairs, and go, man, that 2023 season, we should have been way better. Incredible. Furones, let's move on to segment two, and it's another, I guess, offshoot of the Jalen Ramsey situation here, and it's does Jalen Ramsey's situation change the Dolphins' draft strategy? I thought they needed to draft a cornerback in the first round regardless. I was leaning toward Will Johnson from Michigan. Texas's Jade Barron would be good if you wanted to move down. Maybe Maxwell Harrison from Kentucky would be available in the 20s or something like that. Your mock draft had them taking Tyler Warren, the Pennsylvania, Penn State, Pennsylvania, that's Ivy League, the Penn State tight end at number 13, and then trading back into the first round to get Gray Zabel, the North Dakota State offensive lineman. Does the draft strategy change now? Do you have to, do you even move up to make sure you can get Will Johnson, or do you stay there and say Jade Barron's going to be there? Do you have to take a corner in the first round even?
Yeah, it does change for me. And so if anyone wants to see my initial mock draft, it is available on
It
sunsentinel.com
is.
on the Dolphins page. And it does change for me now that we have the Jalen Ramsey situation because now you might really need to go cornerback with the first or the second pick.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work out for you with the first pick, you don't have to sort of keep yourself tied to that, but it becomes just so much greater of a need. So uh, the first mock draft, I'm looking at it as okay. I would prefer one of the top three linemen, which would be Armand Membu, Will Campbell, or Kelvin Banks. Where if one of those three is available, then I'd go with that player. This is pre Jalen Ramsey, and then I have all three of them taken with Will Campbell going to the Patriots, with Membu going to the Jets, and I have Kelvin Banks going number 10 to the Bears. So in that case, then my next pick would be Will Johnson. So even pre Jalen Ramsey news, I would still go cornerback if you don't get one of those top three linemen. But just looking at things objectively with how the 49ers have revamped their whole defense, I had them taking Will Johnson. I had them viewing him as the
Yeah.
best player available. They need to revamp their defense, and I felt that would be a great spot for him. And then once he's off the board, then I'm like, okay, Jade Barron, where some might say he's going in the 20s, but at 13, would it be too early for him? That's one line of thinking. And I said, the way I have this board playing out, Tyler Warren is still available, who I think is going to be a phenomenal tight end. I mean, what if he's like Brock Bowers last year? George Kittle is a comp for him, which
Yep.
Mike McDaniel has previously worked with in San Francisco, along with Dolphins tight ends coach John Embry. If they get a George Kittle clone in Tyler Warren, then I think that's something that just appeals so strongly to them, and he would be a great best player available selection. But now that was with Jalen Ramsey there, and you still have Cater Kohu coming back as a restricted free
Mhm.
agent, and then you could maybe have some competition with Cam Smith and Storm Duck for that other starting cornerback. We know that Chris Greer is pushing Cam Smith to take the next step, and maybe you could still find one. It's later in the middle round, someone you like. They're good at finding undrafted corners too, where maybe you can
Yeah.
still find another player to compete there. And you also have Artie Burns as a veteran who shouldn't be a starter, but
Yep.
just a depth piece and who can play special teams as well and a homecoming for him. But now you might really need to go cornerback. And if you have to move up to assure you get Will Johnson, then that could be a move. Jalen Ramsey could maybe be waved around as a trade piece
Mhm.
to maybe move up if you need to. Maybe you move up with that second pick. Maybe if the board falls somewhere else, but you have those 10 picks. You can use some of that capital to move up or move down. Where maybe if Will Johnson is there, you don't like Jade Barron that early, you can maybe add more capital, move down, and then maybe get Jade Barron a few picks later. So there's a lot of possibilities, but now I think you really do need to get a cornerback, probably in the first round. But if it's one of those second round cornerbacks, not bad. I might need to do a mock draft 2.0 perk.
Yeah, yeah, you might have to up. A lot has happened. A lot has happened. Chris checks in and says, when you look at the resources at Greer's disposal from 2019 to 2025, and what there is to show from it from a production and a roster standpoint, I can't think of a bigger waste in Dolphins history. Wow. Um,
I think we're going to get to that at some
we
point.
are going to get to that. We are going to get to that. I think he gets an exception because of the win now thing, but we will get to that. Sam says about Jalen Ramsey not being a media guy is one thing. It's fine if that's your personality, but not doing what you can to lift up your team when you play at Ramsey's level is a red flag, and he's always been that way. He's not a touchy feely warm guy. That's fine. But it's just so hard to say what's at the basis of this thing right here. Troy checks in and says Ramsey seems to be a professional businessman. Meanwhile, some of his teammates off the field nonsense is making the Finns look silly. That must get old fast. So that's saying maybe Jalen is sick of what's going on around him. Um,
Yeah,
there,
and one thing about Jalen is he does not cause trouble off the field.
no,
So
he does
yeah,
not.
I mean maybe you don't see him interacting with teammates. Maybe yeah, you don't see him rallying guys, and he sticks to himself. Now he gets his stuff done. He takes
Yes.
care of himself. I mean he's
Yep.
ready to play, and he
Yep.
plays at a high level. And then he
Yep.
also does not create distractions for you off the field. So
Right.
those are one. Yeah, for all the other things we said about okay, is he a guy you can count on to be a leader? Yeah, he's not like a Calais Campbell, of course, by any
Right.
means, but yeah, he doesn't cause trouble for you off the field. That's one thing for sure.
He does not. Here's an interesting one from John Russell checks in. Again, even if you take a cornerback in round one or two, you don't want that guy being CB1 in a supposed win now season. Fans have to sign Asante Samuel or another vet
Yeah,
starting cornerback. Let me ask you
he's
this,
the guy I have
Furones.
my eye on, Asante
Yeah,
Samuel
yeah.
Jr. Yeah.
Asante's, yeah, yeah. He's going to come with a fairly high price tag. He's a local, but I'll ask you this: is there any way that you take two boundary cornerbacks in the draft, maybe first and third round, or is there any way that you would shift Cater Kohu to a boundary cornerback and maybe draft? Another nickel in a boundary. Would you trust Cater? Would you draft two cornerbacks even? Or do you have to
Yeah,
go rookie vet?
those are options. I think too much youth would be risky. Although
Yes.
you have seen like the Eagles' defense had a couple rookies in the secondary in Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, and
Yep.
that turned out okay. Yeah, you've seen the Rams' defense stock up on young talent, and that worked out well. So you could, but yeah, I would prefer the rookie vet path And then that also allows you to fill other holes with those other picks instead of just having to
Right.
stack so much at one position in the draft.
And you got to remember, if you do the two rookie thing, you're also rebuilding the entire secondary. So you're going to have two new starters at safety. I'm not sure that two rookies at corner and two new starters at safety is a winning combination. With the two new starters at safety, yeah, I would rather have another vet at corner, even though it's going to be his first year in this system and first year under Weaver. Let's see. Manolo Rivera checks in and says the front office considers the offensive line is set at center, right tackle, left tackle, and the free agent guard. They won't invest a high pick for guard. Look to a cornerback or a skill position. Can they overlook guard and say we have to get cornerback? Can they overlook defensive tackle in the first round? There are some decent second round cornerbacks. Troy checks in and says, I like Darian Porter at 6'3 with good speed and very physical. Scott Pro says, I think Barron is going to be a bust. Give me Ravel, Siobhan Ravel from East Carolina. He would be a second round guy. So do you have to go corner in the first round, or could you go guard in the first round and corner in the second? DT in the first round, corner in the second.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a true guard because all those linemen that I mentioned, those top three, I wouldn't go past those top three because I'd be reaching. I feel if you go
Yeah,
with one of the others, so that's
yeah,
why I'm not marrying myself to a position. Like similar to how Chris Greer normally says, and maybe he's moving off of this approach a little bit. It's best
yeah.
player available, and that you get yourself in trouble if you draft by need. So yeah, you want to take now. There's also the happy medium of drafting the best player available at a position of need
Right,
on the Venn diagram there, just like
that's right.
right in the middle there.
That's right.
That'd be perfect.
Exactly.
But but yeah, we had a viewer mention Darian Porter at 6'3". Then yeah,
Yeah.
I mean that would be a nice as a tall, long corner. That's
Yep.
a possible replacement for Jalen Ramsey that maybe you could get in that second round. So depending on how the board plays out, there's different ways you could go with this. So yeah, there's options, but yeah, cornerback becomes such a pressing need that pretty much needs to be addressed within the first two rounds. Yeah, unless there's someone good that's falling in the third, and then you can trade
Yeah.
up somewhat because you don't pick until the the
98.
comp picks, the compensatory picks in the third round. So at the end of the third round,
Yep.
98. So
Yep.
which you go from 48 to 90. That's 50 picks without any selections. So and not only that, I have them trading up to you in that third
Right.
round picks.
That's right.
So I would create a bigger gap where you don't
Yeah.
have any picks.
Exactly. Rifleman 165 has jokes. He says, I'm just putting Ethan Bonner in. Simple. There you go, baby.
Oh, I didn't know Joe Shad infiltrated our chat.
That's right. That's right. Joe Sad on the Palm Beach
Yeah.
Post, but he loves him some
Our friend
Ethan
Joe
Bonner.
Shad,
He
he's the
does. Our
biggest
friend
Ethan
Joe
Bonner
Sad.
fan. There
Yep.
is none
Exactly.
bigger. I think he likes him
No,
more than
there's
his
not.
family. I think he likes him more than his family.
That's right, exactly. Scott Pro checks in again and says, "How did this is a little off topic, but we've got to talk about this. How did Greer call Tyreek a leader and not mention Tua? Boy, Tyreek is a
Yeah.
terrible person and a cancer on this team. Well, I don't know if I'm gonna go that far, Scott, but I feel you. Yeah, Chris Greer, and we all said this yesterday. He was struggling. That was a difficult press conference for him. I don't feel sorry for him. That's his job. Like he dug this hole for himself. So I don't feel sorry for him. But I'm stating a fact. It was a very difficult press conference for him to get up there and I don't know if you're admitting failure, but you're admitting things aren't going as planned. Talking about Jalen Ramsey, and this trade situation. But when he was talking about the team leaders, he said Zach Sealer, and then he struggled. He was. It's like wow, and then you could just see the Rolodex of his mind going. There's no Teron, there's no Calais. Who else am I going to say? And so he just kind of starts rattling off some names. So I'm not mad at him for that. They do consider Tua a team leader. The fact that he mentioned Tyreek shows how much he was struggling on that question. Now, the fact that he's struggling on that question is a whole different thing. He shouldn't be struggling on that question. Your team is constructed poorly. but I don't read a whole lot into that. Your thoughts on not mentioning Tua as a team leader?
Yeah, boy, yeah, and it's always tough when you have to reel off names and list people, on the spot. But now he did choose to go that route. It wasn't like the question was asked
Yep.
like, "Hey, so list me your top five leaders,"
Right.
and then he had to come up with them on the spot.
Right.
He chose in his
Right.
answer to start
Yep.
naming names, and then I think
Yep.
he caught himself after Zach Sealer, and then yeah, like you said, he was probably going. Okay, so normally I would say Teron Armstead. Oh shoot, he's not here anymore. All
Right.
right. Oh,
Right.
last year I would have said Calais Campbell. Oh,
Right.
can't say him anymore. And so there was a little bit of a pause,
Yeah.
and then he goes, lots of guys. Like you had only named one so far. You've only named one, and then I don't know if maybe he bypass Tua just feeling okay, that's a given, which is a possibility in his mind. But yeah, you got to at least say his name.
Yeah.
So he missed it there, and then for the next thing to say, and he prefaced Tyreek Hill by saying you could say Tyreek, which is telling. Is it's not he didn't just say Tyreek Hill. That sort of tells you no, he understands how this is going to be perceived, but just you could say Tyreek Hill, and then he named some good ones, and Alec Ingold and Austin Jackson. I think
Yeah.
can grow into
Yeah.
that. He's a young, quiet player still, but I mean, hey, 2020 draft. Now he's on a second contract. Yeah, he can grow into that as well. I think he missed also not only in not naming Tua, but he should have said Jordan Brooks because I think in his second
Yeah.
year on this
Yeah.
team, I mean, he already showed a lot of leadership qualities toward the end of last season, and just the player that he is. And I think he's got the right mindset and approach in being a leader that guys can look to. And John Smith, I would say, who's also going into his
Yes.
second year with the team. I think on offense, John Smith would be a nice team leader to look for.
Before we wrap up this segment, we'll go off topic a little bit. Trinity Soundworks asked this, and this is something that people have asked on social media. Did Chris Greer hire Champ Kelly to replace him as GM, Champ Kelly being the assistant GM, while he takes a VP of operations role going forward? To me, he doesn't seem concerned about long-term job security. No, I don't think that Chris Greer hired his replacement thinking that he will be reassigned in the organization. If I am Steve Ross, I don't want Chris Greer in my organization if he messes this up. Like, what? Why do I want to keep him around again for an extended period with a voice in my organization? He's run my draft since 2016. He was here for Gase. He was here for Flo. He was here for McDaniel. Nothing worked out the way I figured. So I want this guy. If he's not going to be my GM next year, I want him out of my organization.
And let's clarify one thing. You said assistant GM, but Champ Kelly is on as a
Oh,
senior personnel executive.
that's right.
Marvin
He replaced
Allen is
Reggie
the
McKenzie.
assistant.
Right.
Yeah, Reggie McKenzie's
Yes.
role. So Marvin Allen is
Yes.
the assistant general
Right.
manager. So he would be next in line after Chris Greer.
Yep. Yep. Correct. Correct. Good distinguishing there. Let's see. Let's move on here. Let's move on because I know people are clamoring for this. This is one of the top four segments on this four segment show. You know what's coming up. It is time for the Furones bonus.
Oh, the Furones bonus.
All right, baby. We love it. We love it. All right, so here's the Furones bonus this week. David Furones is pumped for the draft as a UM fan, not so pumped as a Dolphins fan. Furones, we know that UM
Wait,
has.
wait, but I'm an objective member of the media, Park. You keep throwing these fan words out there.
That's true. That's true. I just say
Look,
follower.
clarify.
Follower. Follower.
Okay.
How about that? How about that? Right, right. All right, so
I'm a
Furones,
Miami alum. I'm a Miami alum, so I think
you,
I think that one's okay to just show at
yeah,
this point. When I covered the team, I covered the Canes before I covered the Dolphins. Then yeah, I had to be objective. I wouldn't have University of Miami alum in my bio, but then once I moved on to covering the Dolphins, then I went ahead and throw that back on there. And when
there
I'm
we
on
go.
with Big O, I have like a U in my background too on my wall. So
There
I
you
think I
go,
can show
baby.
that afterwards. Yeah.
There you go. I love it. I love it. Hey, look. the U should have a pretty good showing in the draft. Cam Ward, Elijah Arroyo, Damian Martinez, Jalen Rivers, Xavier Restrepo. The Dolphins, well, you need quarterback one, you need quarterback two, you need defensive tackle, you need safety, you need guard. You've got Chris Greer in charge of the draft and the recent draft history of the Dolphins. Explain yourself here with the Dolphins kind of difference here.
Yeah, that dynamic is, if you're a South Florida football fan, you follow the Miami Hurricanes and the Miami Dolphins, you got to be more pumped to see that your guy, your quarterback, Cam Ward, is going number one, and the Miami Hurricanes are going to have the number one pick in the draft for the first time since 1991, which was Russell Maryland
Yep.
in the draft. You also have Vinny Testaverde a few years earlier, who was the number one pick, but it had been a long time, and it's not quite now. Okay, he's going to be your one in the first round, and then you've got a lot of other guys out after. It was a team with a lot of talent that still failed to reach the college football playoff. Boy, just like the Dolphins' 2023 season, and failing to win a playoff game is just, even with that all that talent, yeah, still couldn't quite get there. But you have Elijah Arroyo later in the draft. You have possibly even the second round as a tight end.
Yeah.
Xavier Restrepo, slot receiver, who's just a gamer. And although a lot of people are going to hammered down on his 40 time, and he was dealing with a little bit of a hamstring tweak, it seems, from
Yep.
training for the combine, and how he didn't run it at the combine. And I think he's going to show once he's ready for the season that he's a gamer. He runs routes well.
Mhm.
He's a guy who's going to become a leader on a team. Now he's going to do all the right things as a rookie, and he's not going to be that as a rookie who's like a mid-round pick or something. But down the road, he's a guy who has leadership qualities, which he showed while he was at UM. And yeah, Damian Martinez as a power running back, who actually, it would be nice if the Dolphins, if we had a UM Dolphins
Yeah.
sort of a conglomerate there to bring him onto the Dolphins roster. That'd be nice, along with maybe Jalen Rivers, the
Yeah.
lineman in a later
Like
round
him.
as well. So
Yep.
yeah, this isn't quite like, aside from Cam Ward, who's going to go number one now to the Titans. This isn't quite like those early 2000s drafts where that was where my middle school years and going into high school, where I watched how the Canes every on draft day, it was just how many first rounders are they racking up this
Right.
year. I recall after the 2001 team, that '02 draft, when you had Bryant McKinney, Jeremy Shockey,
Yep.
Ed Reed, Philip Buchanan, and Mike Rumph. Yeah, I can still name them all, right? And a
Yeah.
couple of years later,
I,
they broke that record with six in the first
yep.
round. One, they had Sean Taylor, Kellen Winslow, uh, Jonathan Vilma, DJ Williams, Vernon Carey, and Vince Wilfork. So, yeah,
Wow.
along with other years around there, we had Andre Johnson and Santana Moss,
Yeah.
and Reggie Wayne, and
Yeah.
uh,
Njoku,
Antrell
Dorsett.
Roll. Uh,
Njoku and
so
Dorsett, right?
okay, and then you go down the road, yeah,
Yeah,
and then
down the road.
you
Yeah.
have some, yeah, and then like Eric Flowers was the highest
Right.
pick one year. I think he was like eighth as a tackle, but it gets you excited just to see the Canes this
Yeah.
relevant again in the draft, and not being sort of the first team since the whatever Miami Hurricanes, when Alabama or Georgia is has all these guys going in the draft. The last team that had this many defenders
Right.
selected in the first round, it was that Hurricanes team, and
Right.
they're not being referenced as a team that had a record broken or tied. It's no, the Canes are very relevant in this year's draft with the number one pick. So you're excited about that.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's going to be a good weekend for the Canes. And look, I talked to a few of those guys at the Senior Bowl and was really, really impressed. Restrepo, Jalen Rivers, Damian Martinez. I didn't get a chance to talk to Arroyo, but just listening to those kids, man, you know what it made me think. And this is, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but man, these kids have got to get in front of the camera and get some NIL money. They all just presented themselves great to me. And if I'm a local business, these are the type of kids that I want representing my product. And so, Mario, you got to let these kids do interviews. I mean, I'm telling you, Damien and Xavier and Jalen Rivers were all just absolutely excellent. And I would want them endorsing my product, but that's a whole other topic. I don't know that any of them are hurting for money anyway. But yeah, I was very impressed talking to all those UM kids.
By the way, is it still? I remember I was laughing when the Saturday night I was in Cleveland before the Dolphins Browns game, and then Ewan was playing the Pop Tarts Bowl. Uh, is anyone still talking about Cam Ward sitting out the second half? I was just laughing when that was actually a big deal, and I said on draft day, no one is going to give a bleep that he
Yep.
played one half of football when most guys sit out a bowl game entirely. Yeah, so yeah, let's revisit that on draft night. Is anyone still worried about Cam Ward sitting out the second half for all of those who made a huge deal about that?
I think that that would be the same people who are still mad that Christian McCaffrey sat out his bowl game, right? Like he was at the start of this whole thing.
Okay, see, I didn't even remember that one.
Yeah,
So it
yeah,
goes
he
to show
was
you. Yeah, yeah,
right.
more evidence right there.
Exactly, exactly. All right, Furones, let's go to our final segment, and it's going to be a hard hitting one here, and it's is this era of McDaniel and Greer officially a failure? And look, without Jalen Ramsey here, I mean, I don't. I'm hard pressed to see this team having a winning record. And so if you have back-to-back seasons with 8 wins or fewer, that's not good, but that's jumping ahead of things. You got the best talent in over 20 years that you've had here for, let's just say, these 3 seasons. When you look at Tua and Tyreek and Waddle and Teron and Ramsey and Calais, you've been loaded. Christian Wilkins, Javon Holland, like you've been absolutely loaded. You don't have a playoff. Well, you have Vic Fangio here. Yeah, I mean, come on, like look at all this talent that you've had. This era is definitely a disappointment, but is it a failure? I think we've got to wait till the end of this season. If they have a losing record, I'm going to label it a failure. If they don't, if they have 9 wins or 10 wins and don't make the playoffs, I might keep it at a disappointment. Failure, disappointment. What do you think? What is the kind of the line of delineation there for you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely disappointing already to this point. The one way you quiet that is if you go and have a great season when you now have less expectations, you have fewer expectations. Everyone's sort of backing off, and it's not a trendy pick anymore. And then if you actually turn out better off of it, then that's how you just reverse everything that has happened. But there were a lot of expectations. 2022,
Yeah. Yep.
2023, last season, 2024, and for it to only get you a couple of playoff appearances as a wild card on the road, where one year, we mentioned at the top of the program, you were so stacked and you had all that talent with Vic Fangio as defensive coordinator, who leaves and wins the Super Bowl immediately for a team
Yeah.
who previously had a head coach on the hot seat, Nick Sirianni, right before all that went down.
Yep.
Which, by the way, that's Mike McDaniel has said he would love to be on Nick Sirianni's hot seat. If you can make
Right.
a similar turnaround, then that's how you reverse it and make it a failure, and make it not a failure. But yeah, so I would have to see it to the end. If it goes the way of the season again going awry and that the Dolphins fall short of expectations, miss the playoffs, finish sub 500, no matter how it happens. I don't care if Tua misses time. No, by now you should know you needed a proven veteran quarterback, and you went in and signed Zach Wilson. If Zach Wilson doesn't go and win you games when he was your targeted choice, even if Tua misses half the season, if Zach Wilson doesn't go and just crush opponents when you could have signed. Now I don't know how if Jimmy Garoppolo would have happened, he would have been my top choice, but a more proven veteran to go and handle an offense that has Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane back there, John Smith is probably going to be adding in the draft. Then yeah, it's a failure because you put yourself in this position. I don't care if it's half the defense is injured because this seems to only happen to the Dolphins, where every year there is an excuse as to why you didn't reach those expectations. So, really, excuses are gone. You should be prepared for any and all scenarios. And I'm not taking any more excuses.
Let's go out here and see what folks are saying. Chris says this era has failed to differentiate itself from other ones. Really, how is this different from Sperano, Philbin, and Gase? You have two playoff losses instead of one. I agree totally. I think it was you who said, they've really taken a team that had back-to-back winning seasons and turned it into a team that made back-to-back playoff appearances. Okay, like what happened? Give me more. Give me more. So yeah, Rifleman 165 says, Perk, we got those guys you named when they were long in the tooth, except Tyreek. The other older Hall of Famers types weren't top anymore. I would agree with that. Here's what I would say though. You also had Zach Sealer. You had Bradley Chubb. You had Jalen Phillips. You had Jalen Ramsey. Jalen just turned 30. Devon Achan. Aaron Brewer, Connor Williams, Tua, Javon Holland, Christian Wilkins, Rob Hunt. You had guys. You had guys. So I know what you're saying about Teron and Calais, but man, you had some guys. And then
Park,
Troy,
here's what's so telling is 2020 and 2021 you were so void of talent. I mean,
yeah,
you were coming off that 2019 team, which I remember thinking before I covered the Dolphins. I remember just watching it from afar and watching how they got blown out against the Ravens in the opener and at home against the Patriots the next
yeah,
game. Brian Flores' first year, and I was like,
yep,
this might be the least talented roster in NFL
right,
history. I mean,
right,
it was on track to be the
yep,
worst team that
yep,
any team has had. They ended up pulling out 5 games that year, maybe to the chagrin of some because you lost the first
yeah,
pick
right,
because of it. I guess Brian Flores wasn't seeing eye to eye with the rest of the organization.
yeah,
A topic for a whole nother show. But
right,
then 2020, you get your quarterback in Tua, and you reverse course. Now you are trying to win, and all of a sudden that team went 10-6 back the last year where they still played 16 games.
yeah,
So
right,
10-6 as opposed to and missing the playoffs because that's just the way the bracket filled out that year. The standings did, but yeah, you got a playoff appearance at 9-8 in 2022 when it was 9-8 was also the same record that you fired Flores for. Not that you fired him for the record, it was because of how he collaborated and he communicated with the rest of the organization and the in-house butting of heads. But still, that was the same record with so much more talent going into 2022 because that was when you added
right,
Tyreek Hill and you added Teron Armstead
right,
and so much more. And that was when you were saying Jalen Waddle's developing. Tua Tagovailoa takes the next
right,
step,
right,
and still it ends up 9-8, and then 11-6 in 2023 with again a roster that was just so loaded. It's hard to find more disappointing seasons because other years like the 2008 Wildcat year under Tony Sperano, that team surprised to get
right,
there. That was
right, right,
sensational. That they won the division, granted in the year when Tom Brady got hurt, but
yep,
they made a 10-win turnaround. They were
yep,
1-15 the year before and went 11-5 and got into the playoffs. So that was actually a surprise run. You weren't expecting that. 2016 first year under Gase, same thing. It was kind of like okay,
right,
that was a boost that they actually made the playoffs.
right,
It hadn't been since the early 2000s where there were serious expectations when you had
yep,
that defense of Jason Taylor and Zach Thomas, and
right,
you were kind of a quarterback short because Jay Fiedler was there. You
right,
added Ricky Williams,
mm,
and those two teams, 02 and 03, missed the playoffs after the Dolphins had made playoff runs the previous years. So those were very disappointing. You had Junior Seau on the 03
yep,
team and still missed the playoffs. So those were very disappointing. So maybe it's in that same regard, but boy, yeah, these teams should have done more.
they should have. Troy says, epic fail. All that draft currency wasted, a high quality front office would be a Super Bowl contender for a decade. I'll say this that they did not really improve very many players once they got them. They did a good job with Tua, obviously, but the youngsters, the guys like even taking Austin Jackson, he's better, but how much better did he get? Javon Holland seemed to hit a wall. Christian Wilkins and Rob Hunt took off, but they took off so much they were out of the Dolphins' price range. The Dolphins should have signed both of them a year earlier. They let Andrew Van Ginkel get away. Say what you want about Brandon Jones, they let him get away. And so when you look at all the player development, that's another thing that you would look at this era or these 3 years, well, that's what we're talking about. You would look, and they didn't draft Javon Holland, but McDaniel didn't, but he had him. I'm not sure how much better a lot of these players got, and the ones that did, Wilkins, Hunt, ABG, you should have kept them. You should have kept them. So that's another thing to me about this era is that you didn't spot the players you developed. You didn't keep the right people. That's definitely a bad thing here.
Yeah.
Rifleman 165 says, how can the Dolphins pull off something like the Eagles and Rams have done by retooling quick? I would add Tampa Bay and Detroit in that group also, different
Yeah.
extents. But is it all about the draft at this point, Furones? Can you do another win now thing, reboot? Like, well, how can they do this?
Yeah. Well, and that's why to bring it full circle to the Jalen Ramsey thing. Yeah, they were just rebuilding
Yep,
when the
yep,
Dolphins made that trade, and then
yep,
they end up in the playoffs that same year, and competing against the Lions that postseason, and then
yep,
winning a playoff game against the Vikings, who
yep,
they finished what, 14-3, right?
yeah,
They,
yep, yep,
as
yep,
the top wild card and
yep,
won that game at home. I mean, a tumultuous week with the LA Fires and everything, and gave the Eagles their best game
right,
in that divisional round. That was the toughest
yep,
matchup the Eagles had in
yep,
route to the Super Bowl. So that's very impressive. So it can turn around quickly in the NFL. So you got to hit on these picks, and if you are finding some immediate returns from these young players that they get in the draft, then that could go a long way, along with the pieces that they already have. Let's also keep things in mind and keep it in perspective that this past year could have gone so differently if Tua didn't miss 6 games. So if you also do get a healthy Tua, you could easily be still one of the just I wouldn't put them in the class of the top AFC teams anymore, but
right,
that was more like when the 2023 season was going. You could have said that, and they were actually leading the division, had a chance at the number one seed with 2 weeks remaining before they got blown out by the Ravens, and then lost at home to the Bills to lose the division. Uh, but they could be just in that next tier after the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Ravens if everything does go perfectly. But everything does have to go perfectly for them to do that. So odds are it's not happening.
right, right.
Just
Let's
that's the
wrap.
ceiling. That's the ceiling.
Right, right. Exactly. That's the ideal. Yeah. Hey, let's
Yeah.
wrap it up on this, Verona. This is something that I tweeted. When we were at the owners' meetings, Mike McDaniel was talking a lot about draft and develop. And that's not what he's done here. They've done the win now, go out and get Tyreek and Armstead and Jalen Ramsey. When he was talking draft and develop, do you think that the Ramsey thing was already going because Chris Greer told us they've been talking for weeks? They're Ramsey's representatives and the Dolphins. And do you think that he kind of had a hint that Tehran wasn't going to come back because he said they were operating with the idea Tehran wouldn't be back? Do you think he had an idea that Calais wouldn't be back? And so he's talking draft and develop, knowing that there's no Ramsey, no Tehran, no Calais. Now that I look back on that, I kind of think he might have had a hint that these three guys weren't coming back, and so our best thing is draft and develop as opposed to add veterans and win now. Do you think there's anything to that?
Yeah, and that's also just a natural shift that you had to make once you do start paying your quarterback big money. Is
Yeah, yeah,
so
right,
first, yeah,
right,
to go back in time, you started with the rebuild. You got together all these young pieces that then eventually you had to pay to keep, but you spent all your money on bringing in outside acquisitions, and then you couldn't keep some of your in-house talent that you developed. But okay, yeah, you were trying to win now and maximize those rosters, so it was understandable to an extent. But then that's what you could do while you still had your quarterback on a rookie contract. Then once you pay your quarterback the big money, yes, you can't fill the whole roster with high price free agents anymore. Now you got to go back to getting the rookie contracts elsewhere and finding all those young pieces. So that's also the biggest part of that. in my estimation.
All right, we'll take this last one from P Double because this is the first time P Double has checked in. When we asked about is this era a failure, P Double says fail, fail, fail. You pay Ramsey and then trade him, so he didn't ask for a trade. Ramsey and Campbell, especially seeing the rebuild coming, I think, just admit a rebuild. Do you think that Ramsey and Campbell saw this rebuild coming and said, "I'm getting the f out of here"?
Yeah, but well, if we believe what the Dolphins are telling us, Ramsey did not ask for a trade, but the feeling was still mutual, though. So I don't know.
Right, right.
What do we make of all of it? But
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, that was my initial thought, especially for Ramsey, is that he's got
yeah,
to be looking at this and saying, "Let me get off this sinking ship." He's got he's going to get into the twilight of his career. He's at the end of his prime, probably exiting that prime uh, already, but he's getting up there in age, and he's only got so many more years where he could play at a high level. You would think Calais Campbell somehow still plays at a high level, and when he's
right,
going to turn 39 September 1st
right.
before the season, which is just phenomenal. I always had him going to the Ravens because they're a lot closer, and he already has the ties to that organization and could win a Super Bowl. So it is a cool story that he goes back to where he started his NFL career with the Arizona Cardinals and made a surprise run to a Super Bowl as a rookie
Right.
with those
Yep.
2008 Cardinals that lost to the Steelers and Ben Roethlisberger throwing the touchdown in the back
Yep.
corner of the end zone to Santonio Holmes.
Yep.
But that would be a cool story. But it also, although the Cardinals had a little bit of an upstart season, it's hard to envision them going all the way to making a Super Bowl run again for if this is Calais' last season. But what a story it would be. Yeah, he has earned the right to do as he pleases for that final year, and it is cool that he goes back to where it all started for him.
It is, and we like Calais. We saw him at Furones' retirement party. We wish him well. He's a Cane, one of the classy Canes. I've seen a lot of classy Canes come through the Dolphins. Olivier Vernon and Lamar Miller, Bryant McKinney, Leon Searcy, Frank Gore. Calais was on that list. A lot of real classy Canes, I would just say.
Jalen Phillips and
Jalen
Braxton
Phillips,
Berrios.
yeah, Braxton Berrios, right, right. A couple others.
Great
They've
guy.
had a lot of really classy Canes. So, all right, let's see. And Troy, I'll finish it with this. People keep chiming in. The most pressing concern for me is that the same people are orchestrating this rebuild. Troy, you're not alone in that thought. That's expressed by a lot of folks.
Wait,
I wonder what
it's
Steve
not a
Ross.
rebuild. It's not a
Oh,
rebuild.
that's
Chris
right.
Christian, it's
That's
not
right.
a.
That's right. Ramsey didn't ask for a trade, and this is not a rebuild. Those are the two thoughts. Those are the two thoughts we leave you with. All right, folks, we
Yeah.
enjoyed it. We will check in with you definitely again before the draft, probably next week. Stay on social media. We'll let you know when we'll be back. That's David Furones. I'm Chris Perkins. This has been Dolphins Deep Dive with Perkins.